How to get the best out of your Seiko Speedtimer. What are the 5 things to know? We're going to cover the basic features, charging / power reserve and deep discharge, the stopwatch functions, how to use the tachymeter, and the chronograph calibration. So starting with the basic features, first thing, this is a light powered quartz. So it's not only solar light, but ambient light charges it as well. However, solar light is preferable. No battery change required for at least 8 years, but yes, you will eventually have to change it. However, with proper care, these batteries can last up to 20 years. On a full charge, this watch will last approximately 6 months. It has a power reserve indicator, which we will talk more about in the next section, energy depletion forewarning function, overcharging prevention function, and of course you have all your stopwatch functions. Now let's move on to the charging, power reserve, and deep discharge section. So first I want to talk about the power reserve indicator. You know, some people say that these don't work, that Seiko put fake power reserve indicators in these watches, saying like, oh, I left my watch in the dark for a month and the needle didn't move even 1 line. So there's 2 things we need to know. First, the needle has to be calibrated. So I'm going to show you how to do that later on in this video. And secondly, there's a general misunderstanding of how these power reserve indicators work. And I think it's because there's so many YouTube videos describing this as like a fuel gauge on a car. And it really gives you the wrong impression because it doesn't work the same way at all. The fuel gauge on your car goes down in proportion to how much gas you have left. And this power reserve indicator, it's just not designed to do that. It only has 3 positions: high, medium, and low. So one example we can look at is the solar G-Shock squares. It's the same kind of power reserve indicator, it's just digital. So here you also have a high, medium, and low. So this is not like the power reserve indicator that you're gonna find on a mechanical watch. Those are designed to measure hours, but think about it, we're talking about measuring months, you know, hundreds of days. So this is just designed to give you a rough estimate of how many days based on one of the 3 levels. So if we take a look at the manual, you'll see that in the high position, it means you have 100 days or longer of power. In the medium, it means you have less than 100 days, and low means that you have less than 48 hours. So once you reach low, you'll also have a secondary warning function, which triggers the seconds hand to move at 2-second intervals. And also, you won't be able to use the stopwatch at all. And really quick, guys, if you are finding value in this video, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help the channel and it helps you not miss any future content. Okay, now moving on, this brings us to the charging guidelines. So here you have 3 columns. The A column explains how long it's going to take to charge the watch to just have 1 extra day of power. Column B explains how long to charge for just steady operation of the watch. And then column C explains how long to charge until you reach full power. Now, Seiko recommends that at a minimum, you follow the guidelines of column B. Now, I'm going to leave this up on the screen so you guys can take a screenshot, and I'm just going to make a note of 2 things. So most offices, most rooms inside of a house, on average, are less than 700 lux, meaning that the best and quickest way to charge this watch is in direct sunlight. And then I also want to point out that windows do reduce the lux level of sunlight, so charging times are going to vary, but honestly, as long as you don't neglect this watch, you should be completely fine. Okay, and before we move on, I just want to talk about what happens to this watch if you let it run out of battery completely. If this watch is completely depleted, you run the risk of the built-in integrated circuit potentially falling into an unstable condition. So what does that mean? It means that the tiny microchip computer inside the watch responsible for moving the hands isn't going to be working properly. You're going to have to reset it, and I'll cover that later in the calibration section. So the best practice would be to charge the watch immediately once you see that it's in the low power state. Now, if you fail to do that and you let your watch stay depleted for a long period of time, and I'm not exactly sure how long, but let's say too long, your watch is going to enter a state of deep discharge, which means that the capacitor has been completely depleted and it has to be filled up again before normal watch function can continue. Now, this isn't going to be done in a day. And to be honest, there's really no fast way to fix this. Basically, you're just going to have to expose the watch to light for as long as possible until the watch starts ticking again. And that could take 1 day, 2 days, maybe even a week, depending on how long it was in a state of discharge. And how you go about doing it, it just kind of depends on your situation. But one thing I would be careful of is leaving your watch to just bake out in the sunlight all day. The heat transferred from the sun can make your watch too hot and then potentially ruin the internal mechanisms. All right, and now let's move on over to the stopwatch functions. Now, basic stopwatch controls. Press the top pusher to start the chronograph, press it again to stop the chronograph. Press the bottom pusher to reset the chronograph, which is also going to reset the minute hand. Press the bottom pusher one more time to display the power reserve level, and after like 2 minutes, it's gonna automatically go back to the power reserve level anyway. Okay, now let's go over the split time controls. So let's say that you're tracking a runner or a car or whatever, and you want to keep track of the times without stopping the chronograph timer. So you hit the top pusher to start the chronograph, and let's say right about now, the car is about to complete its first lap. So instead of stopping the chronograph with the top pusher, you're going to hit the bottom pusher. So the second hand has stopped, but the chronograph is still running in the background. And you're going to use this time to write down the lap time or just make a note of it. And once you're finished, then you're going to press the bottom pusher again, and the chronograph is going to resume its function. Now, as the race continues and the car finishes another lap, you're just going to do the same thing again. Make a note of the lap time and then continue until the race or whatever your timing is finished. But let's say you're timing a race and you're trying to track the time of 2 competitors and the race is only like 30 seconds, so you won't have time to write down anything. There's a way to register 2 split times. So let's say, for example, runner A finishes the race at 12 seconds. You press the bottom pusher for the split time, and as we mentioned before, the chronograph is still running in the background. Now, the difference is that instead of hitting the bottom pusher again, we're going to stop the chronograph by hitting the top pusher as soon as runner B finishes the race. Once you hit the top pusher, it seems like nothing happened, but now the chronograph has stopped, and we're still looking at the first split second time that we recorded for runner A. So now you can go ahead and write it down if you want to make a note of it. And once you press the bottom pusher again, it's going to give you the time for runner B. So you can't do this a third time, unfortunately, because the chronograph is completely stopped. So the only downside to this is that it really only works for one event. Okay, so now let's talk about how to use the tachymeter. I'm not going to go too in depth. Essentially, a tachymeter is used to measure speed or rate by timing how long it takes to travel a known distance. So for example, imagine you're driving on a highway and you're looking at the mile markers and you start your chronograph as you pass mile marker 100. So you stop the chronograph when you reach mile marker 101, which means you've traveled 1 mile. So if the chronograph hand points to 95 on the tachymeter scale, it means that your average speed was 95 miles per hour. And the unit of measurement doesn't really matter. If the distance is in kilometers, let's say, then just time how long it takes you to travel 1 kilometer, and wherever the chronograph hand stops, that's the average speed that you were going. So you can also use the tachymeter scale to measure distances traveled. So for example, let's say you're on the highway and you're traveling at a rate of 80 miles per hour. Well, you start your chronograph, and once the hand reaches the number 80 on the tachymeter scale, it means that you have traveled 1 mile. If you wanted to see when you've traveled half of a mile, for example, then you would just double your rate of speed on the tachymeter scale. So in this case, the number 80 times 2 would turn to 160. So when the chronograph reaches the number 160, that means you've traveled half of a mile. Pretty cool. And in a nutshell, that's how you can use the tachymeter scale on your speed timer. Okay, now lastly, we are going to talk about the calibration of the hands. So to calibrate the hands, first, you're going to want to put the watch in calibration mode. And you do that by pulling the crown out to the second position. And then you're going to press down on the top pusher for about 2 seconds until the power reserve indicator moves to its primary position. So you'll want to check each primary position. The correct primary position for the power reserve should be at 0. And also note that it's not at the 35-second mark, but it's pointing to the little dash next to the E for empty. And if you notice, the full position is not at the 45-second mark, but it's right above it where the dash is at the 46-second mark. But when you're in calibration mode, you want to make sure that your fuel gauge is showing empty. If not, then you're just going to have to adjust it. So also the primary position for the chronograph is at 0. Just each hand, press the top pusher, and the watch is going to let you know which hand you're going to adjust by spinning it beforehand. So let's go ahead and start with the chronograph hand. As some of you had commented on my previous review of this watch that your chronograph hand is misaligned, basically just press the bottom pusher or hold it down until it reaches the center at 0. So you don't have to worry, it's not that you have a defective watch or anything, you just have to calibrate the chronograph hand to its primary position. So let's press the top pusher again to toggle the calibration for the power reserve indicator. And we're gonna do the same thing again. We're gonna press the bottom pusher until the power reserve indicator needle is in its primary position at empty. If for some reason you set it to full, then it means that your watch will be reading full, but it's actually empty. So if you were to leave it like that, then the full needle would move all the way to the right towards like the 1 o'clock position, and then that would be your new full. So just make sure that everything is calibrated correctly, and then to lock it all in place, all you got to do is just push the crown back in, and then the power reserve should go back to its current level. And then lastly, for whatever reason, if you need to reset the integrated circuit, what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna pull the crown out to the second click, and you're gonna keep pressing both pushers for 3 seconds or longer. And then after, you're gonna push the crown back into the normal position and then check to see if the running seconds subdial starts to tick. So that means that the watch was reset, and then as a best practice, I would recommend to just go back into calibration mode and then make sure that everything is exactly where it should be. So that's it, guys. At a very minimum, these are just 5 things that I think every Speedtimer owner needs to know to get the best out of their watch. And I really wanted to talk about the internal mechanisms and how this movement works on the inside, but I mean, that video is just going to be way too long, so maybe I'll do it later on. And if you already haven't, guys, like and subscribe for more watch content like this. And I just wanted to take a second just to thank you guys for all the support. Honestly, I really cannot believe that I'm at 2,000 subscribers. I only started like 7 months ago. This was definitely not how I planned it going, but the response has been really incredible. So thank you guys for all the positivity and also all the encouragement and all the really nice comments. It really motivates me to just, keep making this watch content for you guys. So as always, guys, take care, and I will catch you in the next one.